Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, July 26th. We start with a solid reminder for Canadians crossing the U.S. border and some important changes in the Canadian privacy landscape. There's our regular scan of access to information and privacy stories across Canada, with an interesting group of stories from Maggie Macintosh at the Winnipeg Free Press. Plus, we see the settlement of the lawsuit against Meta, have our now regular review of the erosion of privacy and access to information in the United States, and look at international stories that came to our attention. Let's dive in. If you are heading to the United States, it is important to remember your phone and laptop could be searched without a warrant. A recent guide from Boing Boing outlines considerations for people given the powers border agents have at the United States border, including demands to unlock devices and searches that can reach deep into your cloud storage. There's a lot to consider before heading south of the border now, ensuring not only your own, but the personal information you have about friends and loved ones is definitely high on the list. The guide reminds us that for U.S. citizens, the only information that someone going through customs is required to give U.S. border agents includes basic questions about where you're coming from and your trip, questions to assure you're a citizen, and questions relevant to customs. Beyond that, U.S. citizens don't have to answer questions pertaining to personal beliefs, associations, or even who you stayed with. For Canadians crossing into the United States, those rules don't apply, creating a clear distinction, and this guide is just the latest reminder. Next, Saskatchewan has a new privacy commissioner. Grace Hession-David brings a wealth of experience as a Crown prosecutor and defense lawyer to the new position. CBC's Alexander Kwan brings us a great interview with the new commissioner and her goals for the new role. David said she is concerned about the consequences of rapidly evolving technology in every aspect of citizens' lives within Saskatchewan. Included in this is artificial intelligence, which is among the top of David's concerns, and she hopes to educate the general public about it. And finally, Canadian Privacy Commissioner Philippe Dufresne has closed his office's investigation into a student data breach that originated from US-based PowerSchool's software provider. The commissioner's office cited its satisfaction with the company's response and commitment to added security measures. They also showed satisfaction with how PowerSchool took measures to contain the breach, notified affected individuals and organizations, and offered credit protection. The commissioner's office says those steps have prompted Dufresne to discontinue the investigation into the breach, but the office will monitor PowerSchool's commitment to its strengthened security measures. This breach affected thousands of Canadian families. FIPA, along with others, will continue to raise questions given the impacts the breach brought to light. Those questions include the ethical conundrum of taxpayer dollars and fees paying ransom for cybercrime, the appropriate enforcement of outdated Canadian privacy laws on foreign companies, and whether Canadian public bodies should routinely outsource and offshoring the responsibility for both your own and your child's personal information, subjecting it to international laws and risks. Across the country, municipalities and institutions are making moves, some forward, some sideways, on transparency and privacy. Starting with Riley Murphy, LGI reporter at the Caledon Citizen, Caledon has officially launched a lobbyist registry, joining a small but growing group of municipalities aiming to make political influence more transparent. The lobbyist registry is available online and provides residents with easy access to information about who is lobbying council, committee of adjustment members, Property Standards Committee members, and statutorily appointed staff and public office holders. The registry will include details such as who is lobbying, who they are lobbying to, the topic and subject matter, and the date the lobbying activity took place. Meanwhile, documents obtained through access to information by the Canadian press show that staff at the RCMP watchdog agency called for clear and immediate change at the leadership level, following a review calling the work environment toxic. Some of the identified actions that created that toxic workplace included concerns of favoritism, a lack of transparency due to a so-called communication gap between leadership and staff, and heavy workloads causing stress. The Canadian press obtained a copy of the May 2024 assessment, almost 6 months after the filing the Access to Information request with Public Safety Canada, which ordered the report. Next, in Manitoba, where we're continuing to see near-weekly reporting informed by access to information and privacy considerations from Maggie Macintosh, LGI reporter at the Winnipeg Free Press. First, the province has implemented a new code of conduct that prevents teachers from disclosing a student's gender identity or sexual orientation without the student's consent. The Manitoba Code of Conduct says that while principals have obligations to protect personal information, it says they are required to disclose, quote, more information beyond the fact that disciplinary measures have been taken, end quote. This contrasts New Brunswick, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, who have introduced legislation in recent years requiring that schools obtain parental consent before addressing an underage student by their chosen name and gender identity-related pronouns. Privacy advocates can consider this a positive step, but we will need to be watching to see how it plays out in classrooms. Next, we see documents obtained by the Free Press from the Workers' Compensation Board of Manitoba that provide evidence that injury claims have surged in the education sector, raising concerns over teacher health and safety. From that, a report has Manitoba's education minister doubling down on a so-called student-centered approach to violence in schools, which means shifting away from what was called reactive exclusionary practices, such as timeouts, detention, and early dismissal in response to student misbehavior. Best practices would include setting up a meeting between a student and trusted adult, creating an agreement, conducting a threat assessment, requesting a student who has caused physical damage to pay for it, and referring a pupil to student services personnel or an outside agency. Shifting to Alberta, Sarah King Abedy, LGI reporter at Rocky Mountain Outlook, reveals a rare genetically distinct population of bull trout in Kananaskis is under threat from a proposed logging project. A new study shows the fish are already vulnerable, and logging could devastate the ecosystem. The bull trout is Alberta's provincial fish, which is listed as threatened under Alberta's Wildlife Act and the Federal Species at Risk Act. The species require clear, cold water to thrive, and the research found the habitat quality to be relatively pristine in the creek with minimal disturbance, making it an excellent spawning ground. Environmental transparency maintained by the public making focused requests to gain access to information plays a crucial role here. The requests reveal the companies who are facing fines for contravening the Forest Act. Elsewhere, Silene Argent, LGI reporter at the Essex Free Press, reports that Essex has relaunched its online Report a Problem tool, which now lets residents check on the status of their reports in real time, a small but meaningful upgrade for local transparency. Information can be pulled into a spreadsheet to make a report, but according to the Director of Legal and Legislative Services, staff will have to ensure any data shared with Council would comply with the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And finally, Tyler Stockton, LGI reporter at the Yukon News, reports that officials are considering a new government-run recovery home in Whistle Bend, with community input and transparency expected to guide the process. The Yukon government sent out a request for information, asking for information from people who would be interested in running a recovery home program in Whitehorse. The recovery home would be for people who have completed treatment but need a sober living space. There would be space in the home for 12 people, who could live in the home for up to 2 years. While the recovery home is not a guarantee, the RFI represents an early, exploratory step to gauge interest and capacity in the community according to Health and Social Services. In U.S. news, Meta has reached a $5.1 billion settlement in a lawsuit filed by investors against Mark Zuckerberg and company leadership. The lawsuit alleged that Meta did not fully disclose the risks to Facebook users that their personal information would be misused by Cambridge Analytica. Stakeholders also say Facebook officials repeatedly violated a 2012 consent order with the Federal Trade Commission, under which Facebook agreed to stop collecting and sharing personal data without users' consent and remove disclosures from privacy settings that were required under consent order. Separately, Meta has reached a $725 million privacy settlement with users in Europe. While this case is settled in the court, the fallout and consideration of these issues continues. Meanwhile, a visual shift is taking place in American law enforcement. A growing number of officers are wearing face masks, not for COVID, but as a cultural and political symbol, raising civil liberties concerns about surveillance, intimidation, and accountability. Trump officials defend this practice by saying it's for officers' safety among increasing harassment in public and online, and hiding their identities is for their and their family's safety to avoid things like death threats and doxing. Concerns over accountability have risen, and advocates have pushed for officers to wear body cameras and demand that police officers have visible names and badge numbers. And in a bizarre turn of events, former New York Police Department Commissioner Thomas Donlan is suing the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, for $10 million, claiming defamation. The suit stems from public claims that Donlan was mentally unfit for the job of top cop. The filing comes less than a week after Donlan sued Adams and his top deputies, accusing them of operating the department as a criminal racket that rewarded unqualified loyalists and punished whistleblowers. Now, a broader view of ongoing threats to privacy and information access under Trump-era policies, many of which are still playing out today. In 3 Democrat-led states, Medicaid access has been rolled back for people without permanent legal status, this despite these states previously opposing Trump-era immigration restrictions. The states to roll back Medicaid are California, Illinois, and Minnesota. The states say the programs cost way more than officials had projected at a time when the states are facing multi-billion-dollar deficits. Advocates warn this is a quiet form of exclusion that disproportionately affects the most vulnerable. On top of that, the Trump administration has shared Medicaid recipients' personal data, including home addresses and ethnicities, with ICE, raising alarm over how government health data is being weaponized against the public. This affects 79 million Medicaid enrollees, and the information will give ICE officials the ability to find the location of aliens across the country and target based on any ethnicity. Lawmakers and some CMS officials have challenged the legality of deportation officials' access to some states' Medicaid enrollee data. 20 states have sued, alleging the action violated federal health privacy laws. Meanwhile, in Florida, emails reveal that Governor Ron DeSantis blindsided local officials with plans to move immigrants to a detention site dubbed Alligator Alcatraz. The strange move was part of a broader trend of opaque decision-making and disregard for local governance. The emails show that local officials in Southwest Florida were still trying to chase down a rumor about the Alligator Alcatraz facility planned for their county, while state officials were already on the ground and sending vendors through the gates to coordinate construction of the detention center. An executive order granted the state sweeping authority to suspend any statute, rule, or order seen as slowing the response to the immigration emergency, expediting the construction of Alligator Alcatraz. And finally, Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, Trump ally, and current Attorney General of the Department of Justice, is under pressure to testify after a report alleges she told Trump he was named in the Epstein files. It's yet another case where access to information collides with power and scandal. Earlier this month, the Justice Department said it would not be releasing files despite a clamor from online sleuths, conspiracy theorists, and members of Trump's base. Trump's personal ties to Epstein are well established, and his name is already known to have been included in records related to the wealthy financier, who, reportedly, killed himself in jail in 2019 as he awaited trial on sex trafficking charges. Over the years, thousands of pages of records have been released through lawsuits, Epstein's criminal dockets, public disclosures, and Freedom of Information Act requests. Around the world, stories continue to highlight the risks, tensions, and breakthroughs in privacy and transparency. First, a timely guide. Experts have issued new advice for teens navigating artificial intelligence companions, warning that while these tools can be helpful for emotional support, they also raise privacy and manipulation concerns. Parents are urged to stay involved and watch for unhealthy attachments. It's important to recognize that AI companions are programmed to be agreeable and validating, making them unreliable for difficult situations and cannot handle a crisis. In the United Kingdom, 4 individuals thought to be part of an organized crime ring have been arrested in connection with cyber attacks on major retailers, including Harrods and Marks & Spencer. Marks & Spencer said the cyber attack in April stopped it from processing online orders, left store shelves empty, and costed about £300 million, or roughly $407 million. British police say the attacks disrupted operations and exposed customer data, yet another sign of the rising threat of cybercrime to corporations and people. There's some good news for environmental activists. Interpol has removed anti-whaling campaigner Paul Watson from its most wanted list, ending a long campaign many described as politically motivated. Watson was accused of obstructing the crew's official duties by ordering the captain of his ship to throw explosives at the whaling ship, claims which Watson and his team deny. Watson was arrested and jailed on the Japanese warrant last year in Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, but released after 5 months. At the time of his release, the Danish Justice Ministry said it had not received adequate guarantees from Japanese authorities that the time Watson had already served in custody would be counted against any sentence he would receive in Japan. Less encouraging is the continued coverage surrounding the leak of data exposing the identities of British spies and special forces in Afghanistan. UK media reported that the names of more than 100 special forces troops, MI6 spies, and military officers were part of the leak. The breach is being called a national security disaster, raising huge questions about appropriate information management, data governance, and state secrecy. The British government only became aware of the leak when some of the data was posted on Facebook 18 months later by someone who threatened to publish the whole list. A secret program was then launched to relocate Afghans to the UK. And finally, a former security guard at the U.S. Embassy in Norway has been charged with spying for Russia and Iran. Authorities say he passed sensitive information to foreign governments, again showing how insider threats and compromised trust can have global implications. The man is accused of handing over details about the embassy's diplomats, its floor plans, and security routines, among other things. He acknowledges the indictment's facts but denies any criminal guilt. His defense attorney says it comes down to whether, and to what extent, the information in question was classified under the law, and whether it was capable of harming fundamental national interests. She said the man did not hold a security clearance, and that his access to information that could threaten vital national interests was more or less non-existent. As always, we hope you found today's stories helpful in staying informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. To help us keep the mics on, be sure to subscribe through FIPA News Monitoring or consider a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music in today's show was composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIPA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, who help make this successful. Stay safe and stay informed.